My light? What light? Like
Yeah.
what? Okay, cool.
Your selfie light.
My selfie light.
Yeah, the ring light.
What ring light?
You don't have a light that shines from behind the computer to your face?
I don't think so. What's she talking about?
Oh, you gotta get one of them, dang.
What's that?
Yeah.
You see, like you see our faces and how our faces are so much brighter. Yours actually looks dark because we got a light that's behind the camera, behind the computer.
Well, you know, had I known that existed, you know what I mean, I'd have got it. But you
dang dash.
if I don't know about it, nigga, once I know, I get it. Nigga, I ain't supposed to know everything. I'm supposed to know because I know you. Secret squirrel.
You got a big ass studio.
This nigga, so I don't know shit about Zoom. This nigga, I'm, you know. But anyway, so yeah. So I thought it was important. How come I'm not popping up when I talk?
I don't know.
Like the way I pop up when I talk. Hold on one second. Let's get this right. You know we're not Zoom savvy like Dennis.
Shit.
I don't know if I can
way
change
too
that.
much.
Huh?
I don't know how to change that.
So how come when he's talking it pops up and when I talk it don't?
Go to view.
Go to view. Go to view.
View on the top right.
I can hear.
Yeah.
No, never know.
And click speaker.
It's on that.
So when I'm talking, I don't pop up?
No, we see all see it. All of us.
Like when you talk, you pop up on the screen now.
No, but on here, it just basically just moves. It's a green outline. So all three of us are on it.
I know that, but I'm saying for the purpose of the Zoom, when we talk, I want not the Zoom, for the live, even though we're gonna edit it up right. You know, while I'm talking, I wanted to pop up because when you talk, you pop up. Pause. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, you know, I thought it was important that we have a conversation about, you know, education and the reopening of schools. You know, I've been watching the news a lot, and it's really a big topic of conversation. I know that one of Biden's agendas was to give money to the schools so that they can open up safely. But, you know, just based on what I've been hearing from you, Dennis, it's going to be a little more complicated than just money. And I thought it was important because you talk to the principals daily and you hear exactly, and you also talk to students and you know exactly what should be done. And I just wanted to give you the platform to really say, if you were up there with Biden, what would you tell him and how would you tell him to reopen these schools and what are the real problems?
Yeah, Dame, you know, reopening schools within the 100-day period that Biden has proposed is a very tricky thing because it requires, I think, a lot to be in place. I mean, I think up to this point, schools have been doing an effective job of keeping the place safe by cleaning and sanitizing, and you know, the custodial staffs have been doing an amazing job across the country, making sure that people are safe. But, you know, the thing that's important for people to realize is that the number of students that are in schools currently are extremely low. So either there are schools that don't have any kids in school at all, some that's in a hybrid model, or then there's some that kind of gradually brought children back. And so it's a very complicated scenario because everybody keeps saying that schools are the safest place to be. But the reality of it is it's tough to say that when kids aren't in school, because, you know, I think it's easy to say that people who are most affected by the coronavirus, it happens when people are congregated, when people are in concentrated areas. So whether it's in their homes or whether it's in the movie theaters or whether it's in the restaurant or even when it's in the schools, the more people are congregating in those places, the greater the likelihood that people will be infected. So I don't think that, you know, you can legitimately do that until people start having a real conversation about the vaccine and really have a conversation about just making sure that we can assure safety for everybody. Because you got to think, Dave, is that everybody, teachers and administrators don't usually live in the communities in which they serve.
Right.
So they're traveling from different cities and different towns to come into those schools. And so you can obviously see that poses an issue as well. So I don't think you can legitimately say I don't think you could put a time limit or a time stamp as to how long it's going to take. I think we got to take as long as it needs to for us to come up with a plan that actually works. But 100 days is a bit,
well, let me ask you this.
it's overzealous.
If a school opens up and one person catches it, the school got to close, right?
Yeah, in many instances, like in New York City.
But that's what will happen moving forward.
Yeah, you got one or two students that are catching it. They close the school down for 1 or 2 days. If you get, I think, anywhere between 3 to 5 students, you actually have to close it down for much longer. So the reality of it is that you're going to always have this stop and go until more people are vaccinated. So with that being the case, you still got to be able to perfect the things that are working now, which is remote learning. We got to say, we have to find the unique technologies to make that work. We also got to keep in mind that right now school leaders are struggling with the understanding of, well, what's the best way to run my school? Because the moment I thought I figured it out, y'all change it, you know? So we also got to start bringing school leaders to the table, principals to the table, start having conversations about what they think is the easiest and most effective way to bring kids back into school in the safest manner.
So, one of the things that I was also hearing was, teachers were a little upset because they feel that they want you to be in school, you need to be vaccinated, and that they should be one of the people that are getting vaccinated first so they can go back. How do you feel about that?
Again, I think, it's obvious that if that's the plan to open up schools, we most certainly got to push teachers and administrators to the front of that line. But I think what the other side to it is, there are people, even educators, who are still not completely with or satisfied with what they're being told about the vaccine and things like that. So I think right now, obviously that might be the only way to ever get school back to what it used to be, which is to get as many people vaccinated as possible. But there are some people who are still not completely sold on it, which then causes that issue of whether or not, schools can actually open safely or not, because you can't necessarily you can't mandate everybody to take the vaccination. And you can imagine what that looks like. You go to a school where, say, half the staff is vaccinated, the other half isn't. And then now they're looking at each other sideways, the next, the person who sneezes or coughs and stuff like that. So it literally, those are those problems that people don't even think about. But you could just imagine if you're or Senator Milton, you guys are vaccinated and I'm not. I mean, there's a likelihood that if I, again, cough around you, you guys are going to look at me like, yo, D, nah, you go sit outside somewhere, bro. Like, you can't come in here. So I definitely think it's a fine line, but the way things are going right now, I just don't see you being able to get back into schools completely until vaccinations, become the priority.
Now, the last thing I'd like to ask you, and then I want to, open this forum up to the Senator Eddie Milton, is obviously school will never be the same. It will never be the same. And I personally believe that it's a great time to reapproach education and how our children digest information. What would you say would be the best way to reapproach education moving forward, knowing that it will never be the same again, or at least not for a while?
No, great question, Dave. And I think, you obviously have to start with people embracing technology in a way that we know that this is the direction that we have to go. One of the things I was just I did an interview last week, and I shared with the interviewer that blended learning it's not a new invention. It's not a new innovation. We can go back as early as the 1960s when there was a form of blended learning that was happening back then. In the late 1990s, 1998 is when the term blended learning came into play, which means we were clearly aware of the fact that there was an important component to this, which was young people are going to eventually learn, and education was going to evolve into something that requires technology. So now we fast forward to 2020, and we are caught completely off guard. But the reality of it is that in terms of us following the trends and us knowing that 20 some odd years ago that we were going to get to this point where we have to, implement technology for learning purposes. I think most certainly we have to do a better job of embracing it and acknowledging the fact that technology doesn't always have to be villainized as it has been over these past 10 months, 11 months and stuff like that. That people do learn this way. My son is 16 and he's doing better now than he did when he was going to school every day. Why? Because he kind of learns at his own pace. It's not as he has to sit in class for the entire period and listen to somebody talk about something that he can do in 15 minutes. And you and I have talked about that in the past, Damon. You don't really, it doesn't take 60 minutes to teach something to a young person.
Basically, you told me out of an 8-hour day, a kid will be lucky if he retains 45 minutes.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely, Damon. I mean, you think about it, right? You think about all of your young people, all of your children. You look at, let's just use Tallulah as an example. You say, well, how quickly does she learn something that you tell her to do? Like, forget teaching, forget education for a minute. Most of us can teach our own children how to do something in 10 minutes and in 15 minutes, but you have to sit in class for 90 minutes just to learn something that the teacher is teaching because they're moving at that pace. So I think just like everybody else, I think there are places in this country where young people have learned and continue to learn best through technology. And we got to embrace that. It was funny back last year, as a matter of fact, just before the pandemic, I was down in Florida playing golf and I was with a young man and his father. And the young man, it was during the week too. So he asked, can they join us and stuff like that? I said, sure, no problem. Then the kid said to us, do you mind if I fly my drone over you guys while we're playing golf? I can take videos of you guys and everything. I said, yeah, no, that's dope. Do your thing. So the kid started to tell us that he only goes to school 1 day a week. This was before the pandemic. He goes to school 1 day a week and he gets assignments during the week. And legitimately his teachers are there available for him when he needs it. But the reality of it is that he only physically goes into the building. And we're talking about a kid that was extremely articulate, bright, witty, well-rounded, but he had time to get on a golf course with us in the middle of the day because he already did his work. He's flying drones because he had the opportunity.
He's outside when it's sunny.
He's outside. Exactly. And that's the thing, man. You talk about that a lot of, let's just take what you said as an adult and think about it as a young person. That kids should be out enjoying or working at the pool, working at the beach, working at the park, working on the golf course, right? They don't have to be sitting in front of a computer sitting in a desk all day long.
Right.
And we have a unique opportunity right now to reinvent that and not keep fighting. Let's go back to what it used to be. Let's go back to what it used to be. Because that didn't work either. You could call, Senator knows this. You can go to Gary, Indiana. You can go to New York City. The proficiency rate for kids are relatively low anyway. So that meant the system wasn't working before. So it can't hurt to reinvent it. And I think technology is a unique tool to use if we can just embrace it and stop villainizing it as something that's a bad thing.
So, the reason why I think it's important to have the senator here because he's out every day passing laws. He's passed a couple every time I speak to him every week. He tells me about a law he's about to fight for, and then he tells me what has happened. I think it's important that you guys talk so we can figure out how to put in legislation, and articulate it and architect it a certain way. And I'm sure he has certain questions and, just sharing information. So, Senator, the floor is yours, and please talk to the specialist, Dennis, about education.
Appreciate it. So just FYI, just in case I freeze up.
Yeah, you froze. You froze.
I had a meeting with, can you hear me?
It's kind of whack.
With me?
Kinda, but you sound a little distorted. You don't sound like the senator.
Is this better?
Yeah, that's better.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Is this better?
Yeah. If you were on the OSG Zoom, you would have got attacked, but I ain't gonna say that.
I already know. I'm in my. I don't have that prime internet service, so I had a call today with the White House Office of Inter Affairs, and they told me that they were getting ready to, get behind those 2 new stimulus packages that's coming through the pipeline. So the first stimulus package is to address COVID-19 relief, and education was a significant part of that. So I was extremely happy to hear that, just like aligning with what you just did, part of the funding they want to push for through Congress is in reopening schools. And that's making sure that they have the PPE, they have the resources to get everything done that they need to get done to open up safely. So, but there's a couple of things that right now that we are discussing in the State House in Indiana on how about summer, how you have summer learning loss? We're talking about COVID learning loss. We know that children have been learning remotely for almost a year now. And it'll be a year for many communities. And how do we create the resources to provide funding locally for nonprofits, faith-based organizations to provide supplemental learning opportunities? So I'll love to get your thoughts on how to best implement supplemental learning opportunities for children that's trying to catch up. The best example I can give you, when they had the No Child Left Behind funding that came out originally under George W. Bush, and there were a lot of organizations and nonprofits that provided tutoring services. My concern is that with the state of Indiana possibly rushing, putting together some type of a program, that we don't put together a process to vet organizations to provide these supplemental educational services. So I wanted to.
Yeah, well, Senator, I think, again, I applaud everybody who's, utilizing these stimulus funding funds and other funds to really try to open schools back up in a way that's safe and effective. And so when you talk about learning loss, that's something that I've been discussing with the OSG family for a few weeks now. It's a very real phenomenon, right? But I think we got to keep in mind is it gives us an opportunity to really engage principals and other educators in discussions as to how do you gauge learning loss, right? I know there are people who consider themselves specialists in it and can tell you that, especially Black and brown kids, they're going to lose at least a year's worth of instruction. But you know what? That happened in a bad classroom last year too. It happened in a bad classroom 5 years ago. So a teacher who's ill-equipped to do it, unfortunately, it doesn't matter whether it's pandemic, pre-pandemic, post-pandemic. It still depends on the leadership of the school and the quality of teachers that are in those classrooms. So there are teachers that are doing an amazing job across this country, amazing, that kids are learning every single day. Again, I have nothing negative to say about my children's teachers. Both my son, who's 16, and my daughter, who's 8, their teachers are amazing with them. I've been in a lot of schools over the past several months as well, and some great teachers are there too.
But also, your family is a very supportive family. Not everyone has the kind of family and that kind of support system and the discipline.
Yeah, I think, but also too, in addition to that, as I said, a quality teacher is sometimes just as effective as an absent parent. That if a parent isn't around, because we know that this is nothing new. Like in many of the communities, like in Gary or in LA or in New York City, great teachers and great administrators found a way to reach those kids. And I think we got to put a little bit more emphasis on how do we continue to prepare teachers to become better at teaching remotely or teaching blended. We're talking about something that happened almost instantly and overnight for these people. They were in the classroom one day, and then the next day they had to go fully remote. Something nobody has ever been used to. Literally in New York City, they had 3 days the principals had 3 days to reconfigure their schools so that the students can learn remotely and teachers can teach remotely. That's a very difficult concept for a person who's been, let's just say a teacher's been teaching for 15 years. And then now you tell them they got to teach remotely. That's a very difficult thing. So I think when you talk about ways that, that money can be spent, it can be spent more on training teachers how to effectively teach kids remotely and through technology, because that is a very important tool here. That's the one thing that we know is going to remain a constant, is that educators are going to continue to teach through the use of technology. That's never going to change. But one thing that's for certain that people don't talk about is the fact that teachers were ill prepared to deliver quality instruction to kids fully remote. That was extremely a different challenge. So of course, just on that alone, you're gonna have a learning loss. But it wasn't because of kids. That was because the teachers weren't necessarily ready for that particular challenge. And go back to what I said, 20 years, remote learning isn't something new. We just haven't done anything about it. Kids weren't taking computers home. They weren't taking laptops home. They weren't doing those things before the pandemic, which is silly to me because you had them in the building. You already had them in the building. But it was, Senator and Dame, I know you all can remember this, when we used to go to school and our teachers used to make us have to wrap the books in brown paper bags and book covers and stuff like that. So think about that, right? That was us then. A kid right now couldn't take their laptop home or couldn't take an iPad home because the school thought to themselves, listen, if it breaks, I ain't got one to replace it. So what happens? We don't send it home. But if we would have sent those home before the pandemic, we could have identified what kids had issues with hotspots. We could have addressed the issue on how many kids are in the household that, you may have 5 kids in the household and the hotspot might not be strong enough. But those are all things that we had the option of learning if we would have just offered an opportunity for kids to take those things home before the pandemic.
And you know what, Dennis? I wanted to say, like, my daughter goes to a very expensive private school, and one of the things that she was getting was an iPad instead of books. Yep. So I do believe that, her education costs as much as college, and not everyone can afford that we need to put those funds into doing things that, they're doing in private schools for these kids in public school, because it's not fair.
Well, Dave, one of the things that's for certain, and again, I'm in dozens and dozens of schools across the country, technology was not that big of an issue. Like, kids had iPads, had laptops, had smart boards in classrooms. They had those.
They can't take them home.
Because they just didn't take them home.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. My daughter has iPads to take home. You understand what I'm saying?
And you know what? And even if we allow the kids to take it home, mind you, okay, if the iPad or the computer breaks, okay, you take out a warranty on it. Like, okay, as a school, you get a warranty. If the thing breaks, you go buy another one. Like, what's the problem? But we didn't even do that, Dame. And so what ends up happening is we were caught completely off guard, saying to ourselves, well, the kid don't have a hotspot. Well, damn, he didn't have a hotspot before the pandemic.
Right.
He didn't have internet before the pandemic. So why are we now saying as if this technological divide because of COVID? There was a divide before the pandemic.
So now that it's been a year of this, and I'm quite sure, and Senator, I'm sorry for cutting you off, I'm quite sure that you can tell what teachers are doing well by the results from the kids. Maybe those should, probably be the people now teaching putting a class on how to teach remotely. That should be a category in teaching college and so on and so forth. It should now be something teachers are taught to do it. And that's exactly what you're saying. I understand. Sorry, go ahead, Senator.
Yeah.
So how do you find organizations to help get students caught up, right? So how do you prepare church, faith-based organizations, nonprofit organizations that want to provide that tutoring service that may not have the capacity? I just don't want the state to throw money at an issue and we can't track the success of an organization. If we fund your organization $20,000, $100,000 to provide these children in this community with a quality tutoring or supplemental educational services, how can we guarantee that we're going to give it to an organization that's going to do the right thing? Like, is there a scoring rubric? How do you determine that organization has capacity? And we know, it would be great if we had college students to participate. But I don't live in a community where we have a plethora of folks that can volunteer their time and services, right? I'm thinking like, can we engage retired school teachers? Can we bring folks back from the workforce that's retired? Things like that. So just some thoughts there, man. That'd be helpful. And let me just say this. This is great, this conversation right now, because this is real time. Like, I'm in session. I'm literally having conversations and we're drafting legislation. By the time April hits, this is going to be a law. So I can go back, and you were helping me to kind of go back and craft a narrative to speak for communities of color.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, Senator. And I think what you got to think now, are there kids that are in colleges right now to be educators, right? What better people can you put in front of young people to tutor them but those college students? Because it's twofold. It's a twofold purpose. One, they provide the instructional support for those young people so that they can catch up. But two, it gives them the experience of doing things using technology and working remotely with kids as well. So you're almost killing two birds with that one stone, because I wouldn't say that I'm opposed to bringing back retired teachers and things like that. But I will say that the complication there is that now we still got to teach them how to use the technology, which has become the biggest hurdle for educators right now. So if there's a young person who is in college right now, you guys can offer, y'all can use that money to pay for scholarships. You could give a stipend, $1,000, $2,000 stipend to a kid in college who's want to come out there and tutor some kids and stuff like that. So one, it builds the capacity for that soon to be educated, but it also too gives them a sense of pride to know that they're helping, but they're also getting paid to do it as well. So when you talk about throwing money at a problem, I think when you're talking about college students who are very serious about graduating and serious about becoming a professional, them utilizing that opportunity and that platform would be great for them, And again, it looks great on their resume. They're getting paid to do it, and they're doing an amazing service. So I would say you got to kind of put a little bit more pressure on the colleges in Gary or in the surrounding areas of Gary to really help in that process. And they don't, yes, I would say obviously.
But how does he track
people, educators?
But how does he track the success rate? I thought, how does he understand that? How does he know where the money's going and making sure that it's successful?
Well, the difficulty in it is because there wouldn't be at this point no real assessments that we can give. We can give them right this moment. But I do think that when we design the actual protocols for those instructors to come and work with the tutors, the teachers will then be able to see if the kids are improving. You know what I'm saying? Like, let's just forget being sophisticated for me. Just a basic eye test. If there's a kid who's getting tutored, the teacher knows he's getting tutored. If every 2 weeks I'm checking in I'm the teacher, I'm checking in with the tutor. I'm letting them know, like, you know what? I've watched Johnny's work improve in the past 2 weeks. What have you done with him? Well, I've done this, and that. They can then continue that process of teaching Johnny how to be to catch up. So ideally here is you don't want to get too intricate with assessments right now. You want to lay the groundwork of, well, who are the people going to teach the kids? And then how are we going to connect that to the teacher? Right. My children's teachers, as well as I know you guys as well, can tell you whether or not your child is improving or not. So we're not talking about every kid. And that's the part that I think I want us to be very mindful of, Senator, is we're not talking about 100% of the kids in Gary, Indiana. We may be talking about 30%. Let's identify who the 30% are that's falling behind, and let's do something for them. It's more manageable. It's more cost effective. but it's also easier to track that versus saying, okay, everybody in Gary, Indiana is struggling, so we need to get a tutor for every kid. No, you don't. You don't need that. And then, like I said, the conversation with the teacher and the tutor will then also help that process along.
So interesting situation happened today. So Dane, you and I talked about this before. Like when you're passing a law, sometimes you don't have to pass the law or the bill itself. You can offer an amendment that can help improve that legislation. So I was in a committee about a month ago, and I told the chairman of the Education Senate Committee, I said, look, we have to be mindful that there's going to be so much learning loss that Indiana is a state that we give schools letter grades if they fail with A through F. I know some states have that. We should hold all our schools harmless for the year of 2020 to 2021, meaning that if a child takes a standardized test or they're not successful in whatever benchmarks we traditionally set, if they are failing and they're not doing well, we shouldn't hold their school to the same accountability when it was pre-COVID, because that impacts school funding, that impacts so much more economic development. So if a developer comes to Gary or they come to New York and LA and they see this part of the city and that school has an F and that school has a D, they were like, where am I going to get the workforce? Where are we going to send our workers' children to go to school? So you have to be careful how you letter grade a school. So that's why I'm pushing for a null grade. Like 2021 pretty much never happened academically on a scale of A through F. I guess my question to you would be, what's your thoughts on the A through F grading system for schools? Because it's kind of controversial, right?
Yeah.
Because what does an A mean? What does an F mean? Typically, it's in the Black and brown communities where you see the C's, the D's, the F's, school corporations. And it disincentivizes corporations or businesses that want to say they want to move there, when an A and an F may mean different things to certain standards.
Yeah, I think, I have to start by saying, the learning loss that I think we are continuing to circle around is very theoretical at the moment, because it's very difficult for us to find hard, concrete data of whether there had been a loss or not, right? And so what we ended up doing is we set it up initially as if we're struggling so bad, and then what the states have to do is then they have to send in the cavalry. So right. What you may want to think about is the upside of assessing a school right now, because it may be surprising to know that schools aren't doing as bad as people think that they are. See, theoretically, people say that yeah, there's a learning loss, but not for every student. And so we got to be cautious about that, and whether or not the learning loss happened as a result of the pandemic or a grading system, or was it about, subpar teaching instruction from the child's teacher. So I think you should still move forward with being able to assess and evaluate a school, if for not necessarily for the grade itself, but for us to kind of, what we don't want to do is miss a year or two of assessing a school and then pick it up next year, because now we have to now be able to match data for next year and go back 2 years to find data that we can actually, can make any kind of correlation to. So I think you got to continue to make an evaluation of the school annually, regardless of what the circumstances may be. And then from there, we can kind of adjust our analysis of it. But I don't think you should necessarily avoid the actual assessment of the school. because, as I said, it doesn't make any sense at this point for us to keep saying or speaking about this learning loss and then saying, that our kids are that much further behind, because some kids aren't that further behind. There are kids who are actually doing better under these circumstances. So I think in order to get real data, it's important for us to continue to assess and continue to evaluate it, not necessarily by way of punitive measures, but for school leaders to be able to know where their kids are and how the school is performing under these conditions. I think it's very important that we get some kind of evaluative measure in place so that we can talk about whether things are working or not working.
Got you.
Oh,
That's helpful.
yeah. I wanted to ask a question that I've been curious about. I've been thinking. So, I look at the way the world was manipulated with conspiracies through these algorithms. And I was just wondering on an educational level, because everyone, and we spoke about this, everybody, especially children, they digest and they're on their phone all day. You can learn so much about a child just by understanding the algorithms in the phone and making the education available to them through the phone. Is there a way, the same way conspiracy was manipulated to put things in people's face, that we could use those same algorithms and do it with education and use it for school?
Absolutely, Dane. I mean, you think about it this way. Most of the remote learning tools that are available aren't necessarily mobile. They're not mobile friendly. Like, there's stuff that we can use on a computer, but if a kid actually can do his work on on his phone or her phone, there's a strong likelihood that they'll be able to surpass even our expectations of them, because they're on their phones constantly anyway. And so the kids understand, believe it or not, kids understand the algorithms better than us. They know how to get more likes and follows and all that stuff on social media than all of us, because they have this in their hand all the time. So if they have this in their hand, but it's actually related to education, it makes it a lot easier for kids to actually become, friendly with what's happening in their classrooms and stuff like that. Because you got to remember, a kid may not necessarily have a hotspot in their house, but if you got a phone, most likely you have some kind of data plan. So if I'm playing ball in the park and I know, like, oh, damn, it's 5 minutes, I got to jump on with my teacher, chances are I'm not going to run home. But if I can do it on my phone, I may just be able to, like, yo, hold on, y'all, give me 10 minutes. Let me just go sit on a bench, do my work or what have you. So I think us being able to look at technology and the advancement of it, Dame, is saying same thing that's happening tomorrow with you launching your app. The reality of it is that if everything can be in your phone and everything can be on your app, you can become an entrepreneur. You can become wealthy. You can be successful. So why not think about it from the same lens for young people? I don't know a young person that doesn't walk around with a cell phone, without their cell phone. So if you give them a 10 to 15 minute assignment that they can do on their phone, and don't necessarily have to run all the way back home and sit in front of a computer, you may even get more of a higher success rate than you would under these other circumstances. So when we say technology, we can't just limit it to just iPads and laptops. We have to think about what's constantly in the hand of a young person, and that's their phone.
And it would be easier to understand how much time they're spending on their phone, when they're the most attentive. You could put the school app right next to the Instagram app. Like, there's ways, there's ways to keep people engaged. And again, corporately, they are manipulating algorithms, but we could use it to do things in a positive way, at least to collect, data to know when a kid is comfortable with learning, and at least how long his attention span, he has the capability of paying attention.
Yeah, Dame, I know you mentioned this in the past, but I think it's important that we don't take everything in education from a deficit model of everything being wrong and there's nothing right, there's nothing going well. I think it's easier to build on something that's going well than the things that are not. And there are a lot of good things that are happening during the pandemic. And yes, learning loss is real, but again, learning loss didn't necessarily have to happen because of the pandemic. Learning loss can take place because a child is going home to an abusive situation. Learning loss can take place if you're going home to an unstable household where mom and dad is fighting all the time. Like those things happen to young people all the time. So I think we got to keep in mind, and let's not compartmentalize, learning loss as to simply mean because of the pandemic and kids are not in school that they're not learning, or that they're losing education or they're losing intelligence, because it's not necessarily true. We saw over the past 10 months the birth of more entrepreneurs than has ever been in the history of this country. And it's all primarily because of what they do on their phone. Primarily what they do by way of Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and everything else. You know what I'm saying? So,
well, the way I look at it, Dennis, is this is the perfect time for change. If there was any time to accept change, it's now, because there is no choice. And, you're right. People could look at only the dark side and not the light, and that's not healthy. But the opportunity right now is that if something can be made better by doing it differently, by approaching it creatively, by making it better for us culturally, this is the time. And, that's the reason why I thought it was so important for you to get on as a specialist, as somebody that talks to principals day in and day out. I'm sitting looking at the news and I'm like, they don't even know what they're talking about. You know what I'm saying? So I wanted to make sure, at least on my platform, that people receive the right information, and that if anybody else is paying attention that can make a difference, that they can learn from this, whether it's the White House, or any board of education or anything. Reach out. And I know, Dennis, you'll be generous with your information, and it will be based on data from actual principals that are outside every single day helping, whether they're getting paid to do it or not. And I just think that's important that that's known.
No, Dame, and I appreciate that. And as I said, I'm in it. I'm in it every day, and I'm with principals that are in this every day. And what I see is all the pandemic did was exacerbate everything that was already wrong anyway. If you didn't have good tracking systems in place before the pandemic, it revealed itself to you during the pandemic.
Right.
If you had a hard time getting kids in school before the pandemic, you have a hard time getting kids to log on during remote learning. If you had if you could not necessarily help, teachers who were struggling to get better, unfortunately, it's not going to get any better during the pandemic. But I think now it's important for us to have a real in-depth conversation about what actually does work as opposed to what doesn't work. I think every day people turn on the news, we talk about everything that's wrong in the world, everything that's not working. And education is something that you can't necessarily generalize. You cannot make a statement about all learning loss just because of Black and brown kids. And that becomes a problem, because what ends up happening is now, Senator, they end up telling you, all these kids are failing. We need to bring in big corporations to spend hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars to come fix a problem that we know can't be fixed like that. We know our problems are more ingrained in poverty than anything. Until we eradicate poverty, or at least we make a dent in poverty, we're never going to fix the educational system in those schools unless you get a dope principal like an Akbar Cook and a Dr. Asia Johnson, or a Dr. Riley, or some of the amazing people in Gary, Indiana. Like, the reality of it is, great principals actually are able to block all that out and become great. You and I talked earlier, Senator, about a former boss of mine, and he clearly can tell you about the work that I've done. Before people were doing this by way of internet and having all this exposure, I was doing this in Harlem. I was spending 15 hours a day away from my house every day, sometimes 6 and 7 days a week. I didn't live in Harlem, but I worked in Harlem every day because I knew that needed to happen. If you're going to address issues like poverty or lack or issues of food deserts or people who are homeless, if you're going to address those issues, you got to spend time in these communities. As a principal, You can't punch in and out like everybody else. So my advice here is begin to look at things not necessarily as this holistic problem that everybody's having, because there are some great principals in every part of this country that are making sure that their schools don't feel don't feel the pressure or don't feel this loss that everybody's talking about. So I don't want to discredit the fact that there are great people doing great things across this country. Teachers, principals, custodial staff, school safety, everybody in the schools, guidance counselors are doing some amazing, amazing things. So why not, let's just find a way to highlight those best practices, utilize those best practices to then say, you know what, let's put policies in place. Let's put real legislation in place to solve the problem. You're not going to solve a problem by telling everybody that something's wrong. Telling me it's wrong doesn't make you an expert. Fixing it consistently is what makes you an expert.
Thank you. And again, Senator, the purpose of this, and I'm looking at you taking notes. I already know that what we're speaking about is going to end up on that floor, and you're going to be out savvy and out smarting everybody. And knowing, and I know that whatever you do is going to be for us because you're getting the information from us. What I'd like to do is, next week, or actually the senator and I are going to have a Zoom later or tomorrow about the laws that he got passed this week and what he's been fighting for. And we're going to focus in on that. And then I would also like to do something about, and I can't forget it, what's going on in these prisons as relates to education, health, and everything else that goes on with it. So as us being a member of the commission, to me, we get inspired by helping, we get inspired by understanding how to help, and we get inspired by action. And that's what this is. And this is what this is all about. So again, I appreciate it. Tomorrow, Dame Dash Studios comes out. It's an app where they're going to be able to digest all this information, like-minded people that want to learn how to do things rather than talk about it. And both of you have your shows, you have your show, and everyone can see it on Dame Dash Studios. And again, I appreciate the time. So anything y'all want to say in closing? We good. I'm good. Thank you. And I hope somebody's listening that can take this information and use it.
Yeah, Dame, I appreciate you for providing this platform. And I think, it's not often that you get experts at their field to actually speak about things that are going on in real time. And so as an educator, I leave people with the clear understanding that as bad as things are, there are great people out here in education doing great things. You can find them on Instagram. You can find them on Twitter. You can find them all over the place, and they're doing great things. So I think we got to spend a little bit more time celebrating those who are doing amazing work versus this theoretical notion that, there's this learning loss that's taking place that isn't being addressed by so many principals and teachers and educators across the country. So like I said, let's just take it more from, the celebratory aspect of it versus this idea that education is doomed and our kids are going to all, grow up to be nothing.
Hey, Dennis, I told you where I'm at with it. To me, it's an opportunity for change. I'm going to focus on the good stuff, but I'm going to be really focused on the progressive things that we've been talking about that now people have to pay attention to. I'm using this opportunity for that. But definitely, things aren't all lost. The principals do figure things out, but they could use a lot more help, and things can always be better. You know what I'm saying? And I appreciate that. And Senator, anything you want to say?
Man, I feel blessed, man, to be able to connect with brothers like you and everybody that's on the commission, just to tap into a network of folks that help me become a better legislator, a better senator. So I appreciate mad love and respect to both of you and to the entire commission. There's a lot of good stuff that's coming out that's going to benefit our people. So I just say, I think we're going to keep building on our team, keep building on our capacity. I think this is not just a moment, it's going to be a movement. I see it hard.
Absolutely. Well, let everybody know on that floor, they need to come see us. They want to really know the truth, let them know. All right, so, you know, I'll see y'all next week. I'll see you tomorrow, Dennis, on the meetup.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And again, the app launches tomorrow. Make sure everybody stay tuned, pass it around, link up, and let's go. Thank you, and good night.
Right.
Good night, y'all.
All right, y'all.
If you want another amazing video with the one and only Dame Dash, check it out right there next to me. I think you'll enjoy it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.